Good evening, everyone,
Good
and
evening.
welcome to this week's edition of MindFlex. Thank you so much to Project Inspire for having me back. My name is Rabbi Shlomo Buxbaum, and we are coming to you from Silver Spring, Maryland. This time, I'm privileged to have my wife together with me, the holy Rabbanit
Holy.
Dora Buxbaum. And tonight, we're going to speak about a topic that is very near and dear to us. We were asked to share a little bit of our story and how, at least tonight, how we got here. And the truth is that our story is really much more exciting than my own. So why don't we
Or
begin?
maybe the opposite. I'm not sure about that. I don't know which way you would say exciting. I think your story is quite exciting.
Why don't we
Um,
begin at least in that place?
okay. So I did grow up, like my husband mentioned, I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and I'm still a true Denverite at heart, that is for sure. And I'm very, very blessed, and I this is not something that I take for granted. This is something that I thank Hashem for every day of my life. That my biggest role models in my life have always been and continue to be my parents, thank God. And I really grew up in a home that I would say I'm going to focus on three particular areas, and they're going to be the areas that we're going to continuously focus on. But I grew up in a house, just for starters. It was a tremendously joyful home, and I just have memories from the time that I'm very, very young. Just of the house always being filled with song and music and laughter and lots of love and decorations and excitement. It was always like that from the time that I was very young. Um, I don't remember at exactly what age it was, but I have memories thinking that it was from the time that I was quite young, that my home was always filled with all types of people. So it was from the Mishulachim who were coming from Israel and needed a place to sleep, to, the Yeshiva Bachrim who needed a good hot meal, to the Beis Yaakov girls, not at the same time, but, who were living around the corner and they just needed just a listening ear or something, and they were in my home. And then there was also all of the all of the people who were not from, and they were somehow just also coming through at different times. And so even before my parents started doing, official Kirov organization work, there was always this feeling of Kirov to the world, and it was something that very, very much was integrated into my heart. And I attribute a lot of the emotional connection that I feel to people because that was kind of just the way that I was raised. It was just kind of the way that we give and the way that we love all of Klal Yisrael, and it was a tremendous thing for me. Um, when I was in my early teens, already the work that my parents were doing turned into a formal organization. And it started off just, my father teaching Torah in trailers with horses, like right outside. You could just imagine in Denver, Colorado, that's what it was like.
Horses make great students, by the
They
way.
do make good students. This was not just the horses, though, although he wasn't sure who was going to show up. So maybe that's why he started in a trailer, just thinking if nobody else shows up, I got the horses.
Or some cowboys.
But yeah, but thank God it was actually very full, and it grew and it grew and it grew till they found a small storefront and ultimately grew into a larger building. And I'm really not here to tell their story of success. I'm here to tell how this has impacted my role. And I always felt a tremendous amount of achrayas towards the work that my parents were doing, even from the time that it was very mom and pop, like all the mailings that would come home that we needed to get. So there was a certain amount of excitement around the programming that was going on. And we were the ones that were like putting the envelopes together and putting the little mailing labels on and the stamps, and we were getting it out. And, there was that excitement. And then when my mother used to go to shul and have to run the little group for the children, she always would engage us, as we were also able to be somewhat teachers. I mean, I was in, a young girl, but I knew more than those kids, and I was able to teach the groups with her. And there was always that tremendous achrayas that we loved in a good way. And I think that the point to really mention over here is that the idea of authenticity, that our Yiddishkeit was so real to us, who we were. My father, came from Borough Park, and he had gone into Kirov, but he was always telling us about his upbringing and about his yichos and where he came from and his connection to Hashem. And the authenticity of Torah and Yiddishkeit was so true, and it ran through it for sure ran through my parents' veins, and they were able to transmit that to us. And I think that that feeling of just when we have such authentic relationship with our religion, with Yiddishkeit itself, the people that we're working with can feel that authenticity, and they knew like this is a real deal. And I think that lent itself to us being able to create deeper, more meaningful, more enriched relationships. And then as I grew up, from the time that I was very young, high holiday experience, we did not have a center that was big enough, and thank God my parents drew a large crowd. So it meant packing up and going to a hotel for every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it was a privilege. I'm not the one who was organizing it all. I can't speak to that end of it, but just the way that we looked at it as a privilege, and this was something that we were lucky to be able to do. It never felt like it was a burden. And then we had a Shabbos house for 10 years. My parents were living in the Frum community, and for 10 years we traveled every single Shabbos to this other house. And some of my friends were like, "Oh, it's like a Shabbos house. Like it felt like a resort." I'm not going to say it was all easy. There were times even, and I wasn't the one like doing the massive schlepping, and my mother would have to bring the food over, and it was a whole balagan. But somehow it just, we were very proud. We were very, very proud to bring our friends over and to engage in those relationships with all of the guests and the people that were coming through. And it was just something that I really look back at with the fondest of memories. And I guess the last piece that I just want to speak about is the piece of love. So we have the joy that we grew up with, the authenticity, and then the third piece would be just the importance of real, true Avas Yisrael. And that is that when you can meet another Jew, and this was something that I saw, and I hope that I'm continuing to live, but when you see another Jew and this person is a Jew, and you care for this person, and you want, the best for this person, it's not a matter of, "Oh, I've got something for you. I've got this great package to sell you, and I'm going to pull you in." It's more like, and we're going to get to this a little bit more, soon, but it's more just like, I love you and I care for you so deeply. Like, what is it, and how can I help you, and how can I help serve your need in that way? And I think that when the Avas Yisrael is so great, Kamayim hapanim al panim. I think that the other people that are receiving that love can feel that love, and I think that it ends up, just reciprocating in a most beautiful way. So that was a huge piece of my upbringing, those three values of joy, authenticity, and love. And I would also just want to say something very interesting. My mother actually just sent me on my birthday. I won't say which number, but just now this year.
Happy birthday. Did I miss that?
She sent me a picture and she goes, "I thought you'd get a kick out of this. I actually carry this in my briefcase every day." And she took a picture, and I'm like looking what this is. And I see that it's a letter that I wrote to myself in ninth grade. I didn't think my mother keeps a lot of my papers, but this paper she apparently carries in her briefcase every day, and it's Dear Devora, dated all the way down. And we were supposed to say where we saw our life going in 20 years from that point, or maybe it was 15 years, whatever it was. It was actually unbelievably astonishing to me to see how many of those details have, thank God that I've been blessed, have lined up to today. Thank God, thank God. But what I think is even more incredible than that is how many of those traits and those feelings that I was getting from my home and from the way that I was raised were impacting the way that I wanted to lead my life. And I think a lot of them had to do with these three ingredients. So it's a pretty incredible thing.
That is an incredible thing. And my upbringing was not anywhere similar
very
to
different.
that, in the sense that I did. I mean, obviously all of the joy and the love, but I grew up in Flatbush, in Brooklyn, and
End of story.
we did not have that sort of exposure. Although I need to say, though, that being a student of Yeshiva Torah Vodaas did have somewhat. They had young Russian boys would come in once a week. So I think that I did have some exposure. But I think when I was in Eretz Yisrael learning in Yeshiva in Israel, afterwards, I think that if I can try to pin back that very, very first moment, I'm thinking there's a friend of mine who his parents had an apartment in the old city. And the family was somewhat, they were supporters of Esha Torah, and they had this apartment. And my friend, we were in yeshiva together. He would have these Shabbatons in his house, or even just Friday night meals in his house. And sometimes he would invite us from yeshiva, say, "Come over, I'm having some ish guys, we'll come together." And I remember those Shabbosim, at least one of them. Again, not having grown up with any of this. I don't think even growing up, I think in my upbringing, thinking that like most Jews, most, normal Jews are from, and then, there's this thing called, a non-religious, but it's probably like just some minority, out of towners, whatever.
Yeah. And for me, when we would drive into New York, it was like, oh my gosh, there's a yarmulke over there on the street,
Right. But then we were in Israel, and we're having these Shabbatons, and we're having these Shabbos meals, and you have these yeshiva guys, and you have these Aish guys, and it was this feeling, even if they weren't religious, it was this feeling. It wasn't even a feeling of like, what can I do to bring them closer? It was this feeling of, we're sitting around the Shabbos table and look at the diversity.
Wow.
Look what's happening over here. There was something about that to me that felt like this is right. This is right. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be. And again, obviously there was this thing of what's my role in bringing them closer, but it wasn't even that. It was, I want to be in this situation. Like, I want to be present. I want to create these environments where you'll have these frum and not frum singing together, learning together, philosophizing together. Is that a word?
Sure.
Debating philosophy, right? Together. There was something that was wonderful, that was beautiful about it. I married obviously into a great, a wonderful Kira family, and I think that gave me more of an opportunity. As I got to see the Aish world a little bit closer, because that's where I ended up getting my smicha, I came over from the Mir to Aish, and it was right after Rav Noach passed away.
Yeah.
I was there. I was actually at Aish when Rav Noach passed away. If you're not familiar with Rav Noach Weinberg, here again, this is not sponsored content, but this is a wonderful biography of Rav Noach Weinberg, who was a revolutionary in the world of bringing other people closer. And I got to see Rav Noach, and I was very moved by Rav Noach. But after Rav Noach passed away, when for about a full month afterwards, every single day at the yeshiva, more of his students were coming closer and saying, Rav Noach was like a father to me. Rav Noach was, and realizing this kesher, this bond that a rebbe, that a teacher can make with someone that they're reaching out to. To me, it's like, I want that. I want that. And I think that was very much a part of what moved me forward, what pushed me into this. I remember once being in, when we spent some time in Denver, and my father-in-law had asked me if I could give a shir, give a class for some people who are, non-observant people, but just, something that I'm passionate about. So I was just starting out. I didn't have like a whole repertoire of, exciting classes, but there was one sugya, one concept that I was very into, and that was the Mishkan. I was very into like the Parshas Truma, the Mishkan, and seeing how the different parts of the Mishkan correspond to our own inner world, and how the Kodesh HaKadoshim is like the mind, and this and that, right? So I'm like, okay, you know what? Listen, I'll share it. It was based on the Malbim. So it ended up, it was over the course of the summer, and I gave it, a couple part series on understanding the Malbim and how we understand the Mishnah. Not exactly like you're, like a hot curative topic, Right. I don't know if, even Mindflex would bring me on. And there was this elderly fellow over there who's no longer with us, passed away. He came over to me afterwards. He was probably, what was he, in his 80s at the time? He was originally from Omaha, Nebraska, and he was living in Colorado. And he put his hand, I wasn't even a rabbi yet. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, he called me Shlomi. Shlomi. He said, I wish I knew you 50 years ago. He's like, you would have made a Jew out of me. And those words, I'm like, that meant so much to me. I said, you know what, maybe I missed. I mean, listen, I told him, hey, it's never too late, whatever it is. But he said, if you really believe that, then I'm going to make my effort, and I'm going to see, what I can do to spread.
You never underestimate the power of your words.
That's right. That's right. Good old Byron, wherever you are, you you did it. So that's sort of when we made that decision that we were going to move in this direction of Kiruv. But just to go back and reiterate, because I do want to wrap up this part one, and we do have a lot more to say that will continue in tomorrow night's session, and I hope that you'll join us again. Um, but really, what my wife touched on, and that is that these three concepts of joy, authenticity, and love, if we can carry that with us, when we have that in our back pocket, people want to know, what is it? What do we have? Because everybody's looking for joy. Everybody, what's driving people. It says, I think they say in psychology that everyone is driven by either running away from pain or running towards pleasure, which is really the same thing. But when the person sees that somebody else has something that is so special to them that it brings them joy, it makes them happy, they want to know what it is. Sometimes people say, so people will look at someone who's more observant, and in our world, people that we reach out to and say, uh, they didn't seem that happy, and they wonder about that. They wonder, why shouldn't they be so happy? And again, no one could judge what's going on in somebody else's life or the mood that they caught them in, but the overall idea, whereas when somebody encounters somebody else and they say they're joyous, well, I want to know what they have. When they see that they're authentic about it, authentic about their own growth, their own Torah, their own Judaism, their own selves. I don't have to be anybody. I can just be me. I want to know what you have. If you can just be you, I want to know what that is. You must be so confident with what you have that you can be so authentic. And then finally, love. When you're loving somebody else, when you're showing that love, people feel it. The people that went to your parents' shul, and I've seen it, because we've been there so many times. They feel they feel that they genuinely love them. They genuinely care. Like you said, K'mayim el panim el panim, hearts reflect. So those are three things. And here we are. We're in the time of Shovavim. We're in a time when Tshuva's in the air. In a couple of weeks from now, it's going to be Tu B'Shvat. Right? Tu B'Shvat falls out specifically in Shovavim. And Tu B'Shvat is sort of that moment, the beginning of the blossoming of what seems to be a dead tree. And the tree's not dead. The tree has very, very deep roots. And it's just a matter of time until the tree's going to come back to life. It's just a matter of time until Klal Yisrael is going to come back to life. All of these people that are not connected to Torah, all of these the kids that are struggling, the adults that are struggling, the off the derech, right? This is it's their roots are deep in the ground, and the Ribono Shel Olam, God, Hashem is doing His thing. And we're coming closer to that time of redemption. It is going to be this Tu B'Shvat. The trees will come back to life. And we have this beautiful opportunity, this beautiful ability to share that with people, with joy, with authenticity, with love. And we should grab it. We should hold on to it. And to sort of break down those lessons a little bit more, we're going to share with you in the upcoming session 5 priceless principles, as they call them, 5 priceless principles of reaching out to someone in a very, very deep way. And we hope that you'll join us again for that. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you, Laura, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. We're very humbled for being on this call. Thank
yes,
you
and
very,
there are
very
so many wonderful Makarvim, and we are very, very humbled that
we're just doing our little teeny share, and we appreciate being able to share with all of you. So thank you so much for joining us.
And wishing you all a good night.